All right, this is an important discussion. Should police release pictures of heroin addiction because this has become a norm? You may have seen some of these pictures go viral, especially here in America. One recent photo, and we're gonna show the photos, but we're blurring out the faces in these photos because the sad thing about this story is when you see a photo like this, for instance, the one that just recently went viral, this is a young mom, and it's really hard to watch because you do see a little baby in the backseat. So I understand why some people are gonna initially have this reaction of anger because of the child, but then meanwhile, you see a person who is suffering from addiction in the front seat of the car. She's slumped over, she's overdosed, and she is suffering a heroin addiction. And what the police do is the police, specifically in this case, they blasted that photo. They're hoping that they're going to educate the public on this epidemic of heroin usage. Meanwhile, if you look at some of the comments, if you go look at any of these photos that have been recently posted by the police department on a number of different media outlets that have reposted these photos, you see how these victims, and I want to call them victims because addiction is a mental illness. Addiction has been proven to be genetic. It has been proven to be a mental illness. So a lot of these people that are suffering, they need treatment, just like you would need treatment with any other illness. So these people are being demonized. Their names are underneath the photo. So they're being demonized, they're being vilified, they're being called all kinds of names. Their towns now see them in a certain light as abandoning their child. And yes, that child, that's a very sad case, but by helping that child, by helping that person who's suffering from addiction, you don't then penalize them and criminalize it and throw them in jail like this mother that I'm speaking of. And there's a ton of other photos out there. But this mother that I'm speaking of, she was charged with child endangerment, which in this specific case, you know, she should, but get her help. Get her help, and let's not further perpetuate the stigma on mental illness and addiction so that you paint them to be these terrible people when they need help more than anything. So do you guys agree with me, or?
I agree, Sam, I do agree with you. What you said it so beautifully that instead of vilifying these people, let's try to save them from themselves. Yes, I do. Okay, so I saw the picture and I read the article, and one of the reasons why they had the article is because the guy said that this type of addiction is seeping into small towns in America, and I'm like, dude, wake up! It's been in small town America. It's one. Two, I think if they're showing this picture, they should blur out faces to protect the identities of both people because you can still see what is going on clearly without showing their face. But the other argument people had was, you know, it's mean of them to do this to these people. I think that you should bring awareness and the picture, people need to see this. They need to see this, but the narrative needs to be, like you said, okay, this is happening. How can we fix this? How can we get help? And how can we turn this into a positive, for lack of a better word, I guess, you know. But I don't disagree with showing this to the masses because we watch shows like Intervention on A&E that for an hour we are seeing, and it's most.
Yeah, but they're giving consent. This woman's not
Right,
giving consent to show her face, and that's not fair.
It's not fair, and that's why I said they should blur the picture and blur out the faces of the victims, both the child and the woman. But I welcome these type of images because it is bringing awareness, you know. And I hate to always talk about Albuquerque, but a couple years ago, or about 10 years ago, they would put on the front page of the newspaper anyone who was arrested for a DWI that weekend because New Mexico had a huge driving while intoxicating rate. People were dying like at least twice a month in one city that doesn't have 1 million people. So and it really scared a lot of people straight.
Right.
So I think
but you can't. Okay, I get where you're going with that, like, because like. You can, believe me, I'm not one to advocate for DWIs or DUIs because to put yourself in a vehicle when you are using and jeopardize the lives of so many other people, including yourself, is so selfish. But at the same time, and believe me, it's horrific. And if you were to kill somebody, you're going to have to do the time for that. You're going to have to pay that price. If you killed my dad or my brother or my daughter one day, like, I would want you to pay that price. But at the same time, that person shaming them isn't going to scare them straight. Because if you have an addiction, no matter if your name's printed on the paper, no matter if your face is printed on the paper, no matter if people are vilifying you and shaming you, that doesn't scare you straight. Unfortunately, you need real help, you need real treatment, and you deserve that treatment.
Yeah, I think something that you both are touching on that I think we should talk about is education. Because the police, what their intention is is to educate people on just the horrors of addiction and what it looks like. What is the real face of addiction, everyday addiction, small town America. And I think that it is noble that they are trying to promote education. However, I think what I'm hearing and how I feel is that this is not really an effective way to educate people. And also, this isn't an effective way to educate someone with addiction on what the horrific effects of their addiction is doing. This is shaming them. This isn't encouraging them to get help. I think the crux of why I like the show Intervention is because, one, they give consent, and two, at the end of it, whether they know it or not, it is all about getting them help. It is all about getting them into treatment. So I think that there's a little bit of a disconnect within the police departments that are putting out these photos with how they really can stop the problem, and not with the people who are the problem. Because this is this woman has a major problem. She is a problem. She's not being a good mother right now, and she needs to be called out. This is not an effective way of doing that for her. She needs help. And scare tactics for other people are one thing, but there are other ways to, I mean, I think you made a really good point. It's scary enough to see that needle in her hand when she's sitting in the front seat, even if we don't see her face. I think it's almost scarier because then if you're someone that's struggling with that addiction, you can imagine that face being yours.
That's a great point, and that's a great point. And I think, you know, what bothers me about this is just knowing how many people out there need help. And in this article, it mentioned that in June, a report from the United Nations warned of a heroin epidemic gripping America with a cheap supply, helping push the numbers of users to a 20-year high. And a lot of these drugs that are cheap on the street are cut with like elephant tranquilizer, and it makes it really cheap. People are getting crazy high, and it pushes their addiction through the roof. A lot of these people, you know, Amir mentioned earlier the John Oliver interview where it's like this expose about addiction and pills, and how a lot of people start out with prescription pills that they had a hurt knee, and then they were put on morphine and opioids, and then all of a sudden, like, they're taken off that medication, they're already dependent on it, and so they have to go find a cheap option on the street, and then they become an addict. So there's so many layers to the story, and then you look at the criminalization aspect of it. There was a really great documentary with Lisa Ling recently on CNN.
Love her.
Love her. And she went into different neighborhoods, and it was all about heroin addiction. And she also looked at different police departments and how they were treating the addicts. And one police department stood out in all of the police departments in the United States. And they were trying to emulate how some other police departments handle it internationally, where if someone were to come into the police department with their paraphernalia, they would not be arrested, they would be immediately sent to treatment. And they've noticed that the recidivism rate of going back into jail, this recidivism rate decreases immensely because these people have gotten actual treatment rather than being thrown behind bars and then released, you know, a week later, a couple days later, or months later, just to kind of restart their, you can't just like all of a sudden be better. Like, you need those tools to break this addiction, and sometimes you need to go back to rehab 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. It's so sad.
Sam, do you think, with that said, do you think the war on this is not so much disciplining or arresting these people? Do you think that, and just an honest opinion, that if more police departments and more of the authorities and the officials would take that approach to drug, that we would see major changes in that?
I absolutely do. I think, you know, and Lisa Ling pointed it out with this one department, and what was sad about this, and she highlighted and underscored this very point, where this department was in a very affluential neighborhood.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, and then she went into a jail where it was in an inner city jail, and a lot of these people were addicts, and they were slammed, and because they were repeat offenders and they never had the opportunity of getting treatment, they're in for life.
It's funny you say.
These are addicts that are in for life. They're in behind bars, struggling and suffering. And because they've continually repeated their offenses of just drug addiction, they don't have a chance to get better. They don't have a chance to go be with their children. Then you have these broken families. So that one police department that was not arresting people and they were actually giving them help, they actually saw this incredible success rate happen, even though it was in an affluential neighborhood. Not to separate the two or say that one would be successful and one wouldn't, but it's sad that you only are seeing that, at least specifically, this is a limited case. But it's too bad that we can't see that in more neighborhoods and more people have these success rates and lower recidivism rates.
It's interesting you said that affluential neighborhoods, because stereotypes of course exist. They always think that heroin addicts or crackheads are always minorities. They're always people with less than. But I actually had the opportunity to talk to a young woman, I'm not gonna say her name, but she we talked about drug and alcohol abuse, just in a clandestine conversation. She said the reason why, and she is from a more, oh God, I hate saying urban, I hate saying disadvantaged, but she's not from an affluential neighborhood. And she said the reason why drugs are down in our neighborhoods because we've seen what they do to people. And a lot of people that, like you said, that are from affluential lifestyles are able to get the Vicodin, the Oxy, and all that because it's readily available to them, and so they don't think that I can become addicted to this. Oh, this can happen to me because they think that doesn't happen to people of that economical class.
Prescription pills are so dangerous.
Dangerous.
There's more addiction and more overdoses with prescription pills than any other drug combined, and that's what's really scary.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked before on this show about what I was prescribed after knee surgery and how that totally fucked me up and whatnot. And
you could see how you could have easily gone down that slippery slope.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it definitely led to a depression for me, for sure. But that's sort of a larger story. What I want to talk about with both of you is what I thought you were saying, Sam, about no one wants to be a drug addict. And the show Intervention, that is a show that I enjoy and I like a lot, and I do think it does a pretty good job of showing the face of addiction and raising awareness. At how it can affect people of all different socioeconomic statuses, which I think is really important.
Does not discriminate. Addiction does not discriminate.
Yeah, what they say on that show that I think is important is that there are no old happy addicts. So if this woman who is obviously suffering, she's not happy. She probably wants help. She probably hasn't been given the opportunity or the chance or even knows that there are options for help or for treatment. And
it's proven that it's a disease. It's a disease. Why are we treating cancer but we're not treating addicts?
Right.
Why isn't she being given empathy? And why isn't she being given treatment?
Right. I mean,
such a stigma. It's bullshit.
It is bullshit. And I think that's sort of the disconnect that we are seeing a little bit in some police forces where it's they're shaming this.
In our healthcare, in our government. Why do we not have more resources for mental health care? Why? I went to an event last night, the Maple Center of Counseling, where they rely on fundraising efforts so they can provide therapy and treatment and counseling for people in need. And they they are underfunded, they are under-resourced, and they're trying to help people that have no control over their mental health status or their addiction, and they're hoping to get help, hoping, just like if you were to get help with anything else. And like I've said many times on the show, I always repeat it from Dr. Drew, treat above the neck like you would below the neck. And there's such a disconnect out there. Well, and it's so fucking infuriating.
There's a disconnect, I think, Sam, because people, it's like if you've experienced a family member, a friend, a loved one through addiction, of course you're more sensitive because you've lived through that with people. But normally, when you look at addiction on television, you always see a crackhead. It's painted as like it's like this myopic view of what addiction looks like.
Or you see them as weak, or you see them as like giving up.
And so people, I feel that as humans, we are more able to connect and sympathize and empathize and identify with people if we've experienced something to that effect. Again, with depression, if you're depressed, I can identify with you because I was there with you. So of course, a lot of these people that have money to give, probably, and I could be wrong, this is just my guess, they probably see addiction and drug abuse as something that's very like, oh, we don't want to touch that. That's, it's not a worthy cause, I guess, when it's so is.
It absolutely is, and we need to do more here in the U.S. at least, for everywhere, but here for more mental health care. And for the people out there that are dealing with addiction, we'll provide a number of resources. For the people out there that are dealing with addiction, not personally, but, well, it is personal when it is somebody close to you. I've been there, I know, trust me. So go to Al-Anon. Al-Anon is free. Al-Anon is fantastic. It has saved me. It will save you. And it gives you the tools to help the person that is suffering. Because you need to have boundaries. You need to support that person, but at the same time, you need to make sure that you know when to support and when not, and how to best support yourself. So go to Al-Anon. We'll provide resources. Please keep the conversation going. Thank you so much, you guys. And we'll see you next time on Pop Trigger.